Hello everybody and welcome to Toitū Curator's Corner, episode number 33. My name is Sean Brosnan. I'm a curator at Toitū Settlers Museum here in Dunedin, and I make these little stories about our early history. Now today's story is going to focus back on the early settlers of the first months of settlement, the people who came on the Phillip Lang in 1848. And it's going to complement episode 30, which was about the little mini settlement just outside the main town of Dunedin, which was called Little Paisley because the three families who lived there came from Paisley. I'm going to talk today about another little settlement like that, this one up on the hill above Dunedin, again outside the main settlement, and again built by people who didn't have the means to buy land or to lease land, and so they squatted in the town belt semi-officially, and for that reason their little clump of houses was called Squatters Gully. Now, the information I have about it mainly comes from a letter written in 1849 by one of the settlers there, John Buchanan, and also from the memoir from 1916 at least, written by John Maclaggan, who as a boy lived there a little bit later on in 1851. Here's what John Maclaggan has to say about Squatters Gully in his memoir. Squatters Gully is away up in the bush above what is called Maclaggan Street. These people put 4 houses up, all in a row, up the side of this small creek, and all about the same distance apart. The front to face the sun all day. And in between the 2 high hills, the sun in the summertime was terrible hot. They had cleared an acre of the bush each that sloped up from the back of their clay houses. And when we went to live at this place, there was the most of each plot planted with potatoes. My best guess as to its location is here, somewhere in the town belt on the edge of what is now Jubilee Park. I've tramped around in the bush in this area quite a bit with Maclaggan's description in mind to try and identify the exact spot. But this whole area has been modified considerably since the 1840s, and so there are no remaining signs of this first phase of settlement evident, above ground anyway. I think it would have likely been on the far side of the plain fields, just near the memorial to Queen Victoria's 50th Jubilee that gives the park its name. Now, the reason for my interest was that I used this group of cottages as the exemplar of the first phase wattle-and-daub cottage area that we replicated in the Toitū redevelopment in 2012. And specifically, our replica cottage is based on the Buchanan family's cottage, since we have a nice description of it from that letter that John Buchanan sent back to his family in Kirkintilloch near Glasgow in November 1849. He first described its site as on the company's reserve, situated about 1/4 mile from Dunedin in the bush. And then he gives these details. After great perseverance and difficulty, I have at length succeeded erecting a house, single-handed, with the exception of 2 half days, which I got from Alexander Watson. Now, Watson was another passenger on the Phillip Lang. The house consists of 1 apartment, about 12 feet square. The sides, upwards of 7 feet high, are posted. The posts, being about 1 yard asunder, are wattled across and clayed betwixt the wattles. It is roofed with grass, and I have a clay chimney attached to it. Now, the thing to know about John Buchanan is that he was formerly a hand loom weaver in Kirkintilloch, which is an ancient village near Glasgow in Scotland. But, like most of the weavers, he'd become redundant, and so he'd come out to Otago to reinvent himself. But he was 49, quite a bit older than most of the settlers. Now, there are a couple of things that strike me in his description of the construction of his cottage. The first is the date, November 1849. Now, that's a whole 18 months after the Phillip Lang had arrived back in April of 1848. And that's an awfully long time to think about him having to struggle away building this house on his own up there on the hill. A long time for his family to wait for their first real house in Otago. And that brings me to the second point of note, and that is his reference to great perseverance and difficulty in building it, and that he did so single-handedly, apart from that little bit of help from Alexander Watson. Now, just think about that for a moment. This is a 49-year-old man, formerly a skilled tradesman in an ancient stone village in lowland Scotland, but now reduced, I suppose, to beginning again as a humble labourer in this muddy little settlement on the other side of the world. Earlier in the letter, he's also described the sort of work that he's been able to get in the colony so far to his family, and that involved bush felling, land clearing, but mostly working for the New Zealand company on building its roads. Now that's hard physical labour in each of those cases, but we know from an earlier episode in this series that for most of the time we're talking about here, working for the New Zealand company involved 10-hour days. So just think about that for a moment. He's worked in hard grinding physical labour through the day, and then at night he's had to walk up that steep hill on muddy bush tracks, tramp about, and in his exhausted state, start again and build this house for his family. Perhaps it's no wonder then that it took John upwards of 18 months to finally put together that house for his little family. So next time you come along to Toitū and perhaps wander in to our replica cottage, just spare a thought for a moment about poor old John Buchanan trudging his way up the hill, exhausted after his day labour and having to start again and build a house from tree branches, chopped up flax and clay. A hard process, but that is what pioneering was all about. And I suppose that's why, even after all these years, we still revere that pioneer generation.